Rental assistance in Rhode Island is going straight to tenants, and they're still not paying. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the rental assistance program in Rhode Island. And apparently, rental assistance payments are going straight to the tenants, and guess what? Surprise, surprise, they are still not using that money to pay the landlords the money that they're owed. So basically, they're getting a free rent check, and at the same time, they can't be evicted. Now, I have a little bit of a problem with that. But before we get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of this idiotic policy by the state of Rhode Island, okay? It sounds pretty dumb to me, but maybe someone here thinks it's a good idea. So, this article, it comes from golocalprov.com, and it says, landlords frustrated Rhode Island rent relief going directly to tenants who still might not pay. Landlords in Rhode Island are decrying the process by which the state's rent relief program is allowing some tenants who owe back rent to receive checks directly, who the landlords say might not ever pay what is owed. Jeffrey and Andrew Butler with Elmwood Property Management said they have worked with Rent Relief Rhode Island to help a number of tenants facing eviction get the assistance they needed. However, in recent weeks, the Butlers say two tenants received checks of over $11,000 and $12,150 directly, despite the Butlers and their lawyer saying they followed the process required to receive that money directly. Good God, okay? So these landlords went through the entire process to get rental assistance for these two tenants, okay? One of them owed them $11,000, the other one owed them over $12,000, and the state of Rhode Island sent the checks to the tenants. Are you kidding me? Okay, that is a doomed policy. That is just completely screwed up. The tenants aren't the ones who are owed this money. The tenants have gotten to live for free throughout the entire pandemic, and now you're giving them a bonus for not paying the landlords? I mean, what obligation would the tenant have to pay the landlord any of that money right now? They just go cash the check, and then they could just leave, just disappear. I mean, for real. You know, maybe these landlords could sue them in small claims court, but I mean, this is the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. And this is exactly the reason why these rental assistance programs should have never had anything to do with the tenants. It's all about the money that's owed to the landlord, not the tenants. And these states can't get that through their skulls. No wonder landlords don't even want to participate in the program in a lot of cases, okay? It appears to me that the tenants can manipulate the system merely by telling Rent Relief Rhode Island they could not reach the landlord or the landlord was being uncooperative, Jeff Butler told Go Local. Now the Butlers say the tenant who received the check for $12,150 is threatening to not hand it over. The necessary documentation was hand-delivered to rent relief representatives at district court by our attorney and my property manager, said Butler. Also, following that, my property manager contacted Rent Relief, and they confirmed that there was a notation on the account to send the check directly to us, and they made a mistake, he added. When we asked them to correct the mistake, they refused, saying it was too late. Too late, my butt. Cancel that check. Cancel it ASAP, right? If the tenant tries to cash it, call it fraud, and then send the check directly to the landlord. Okay, this isn't the kind of mistake that you can just let go. That's $12,000, okay? This landlord deserves to be paid the money that they are owed, okay? And they went through the process, the completely ridiculous rental assistance process, and you're still screwing them over? Come on, if this tenant doesn't sign this check over, then this landlord needs to go after the state and go after this tenant hard, okay? And I'm talking about hiring lawyers and just suing the heck out of them. In both instances, we obviously applied for the rent relief and supplied all documentation and were cooperative, said Butler. Both tenants were under eviction and we met all criteria. In June, Go Local reported that Rhode Island had received $200 million in federal funds for renters during the pandemic in December 2020, and 5.5 months later had only distributed 1.2 million. Yeah, not surprising right there, okay? I mean, that's like 0.5%, okay? So give me a break here. They really screwed this landlord over. This landlord, justifiably upset. On Tuesday, Andrew Butler sent an email to Deborah Devine at Rent Relief RI addressing the situation of the $12,150 payment to their tenant. On September 1st at roughly 10 a.m. on the second floor of the Kent County District Courthouse, personally handed in the landlord information for the case. Our attorney, Stephen Litwin, who is attached to this email, was present while I was handing in the paperwork to the gentlemen that work for Rent Relief RI. I confirmed with him that all the paperwork was submitted, wrote Butler. On September 9th, I called and spoke with Tia, who confirmed all the paperwork was submitted. Tia also noted the account that the landlord is cooperating and should be issued payment directly. On September 13th, payment was issued directly to the tenant, he continued. Yeah, so it sounds like, landlord was 100% cooperative, but here's my problem, okay? So there should never have been a system set up in this state where if the landlord is uncooperative, to pay the tenant. So that gives the tenant motivation to claim that the landlord is being uncooperative. The tenant shouldn't have even been involved in this process, in my opinion, okay? So if they were going to have a rent relief program, the landlord should have been the only one involved. That's it. Should have just provided the lease, said, hey, the tenant is not paying, and you won't allow me to evict them, so therefore you should pay me. Period. That's it. That's all you should have. I mean, it's pretty simple, but no. They had all these documentation requirements, all of these qualifications. The tenant couldn't be making over 80% of the median area income. And then Rhode Island and other states threw in the thing where, well, if the landlord isn't cooperating, we'll pay you. Like, pay what do you need to pay the tenant for? I mean, for real, what financial burden is the tenant facing if the landlord is uncooperative? The fact that they didn't have to pay rent for the last year, I'm facing a burden because I didn't have to pay rent for the last year. So that $1,000 a month, that $12,000 that I owe, I deserve to be paid for having to owe that $12,000. I'm like, no, the landlord is the one taking the financial hit. I mean, gosh, what is wrong with these people? I mean, you would think these politicians would have thought this through. Because it just doesn't make sense. That's, tantamount to saying, okay, the grocery store has to provide free food to the homeless, right? And then we're going to reimburse the grocery store later. But if the grocery store doesn't immediately fill out all the paperwork right and is uncooperative, then we'll pay the person who took the free groceries for those free groceries. But they already got the free groceries. So what do they need money? They just don't understand how ridiculous this is. And it seems like pretty obvious how ridiculous it is to anybody with any common sense whatsoever. After several conversations with the call center and with Yilmarie Garcia and Malaya Lodge, I have been unable to get a clear and accurate answer as to why this mistake was made, wrote Butler. I have also been told that you are the only one who knows who the attorney is that represents Rent Relief RI, and the only person who can stop payment on the $12,150 check issued to the tenant to reissue it to the landlord Elmwood Realty LLC directly. To be clear, the tenant's husband has directly stated to Jeffrey Butler that he will take the check, cash it, and leave, he added. That is our concern here. The Butlers say they have not yet received a response. So, yeah, simple solution would be just to cancel the check, okay? But the problem is that they don't want to admit that they screwed up, okay? And that's what I pretty much am figuring right now. And it's sad seeing that a landlord has to go through this sort of situation with a rent relief program and ridiculous rent relief rules that don't even make sense. Okay, so I'm going to skip a couple of paragraphs here. Jeff Butler said that Elmwood Realty, which owns 50 properties and has 240 units, has to date worked with 8 other tenants facing eviction who have sought assistance, and that Elmwood received their back rent due directly from Rent Relief RI. Rent Relief RI saying these other tenants who received the checks directly signed a contract to pay it back. That's ridiculous and illogical, said Butler. Now Butler says he expects to see more eviction proceedings with federal pandemic unemployment benefits expiring. We have plenty of tenants who have paid us every month during the pandemic. Now we have folks with the unemployment benefits running out. They're suddenly applying for rent relief, said Butler. Yeah, so he brought up a point, and it's a good one, okay? The unemployment benefits, now that they're over, those tenants who were receiving those benefits, they can no longer pay rent, so now they're applying for rent assistance. But I'm not surprised by that at all. It's too bad that this landlord has to go through this bad situation. Like I said, I don't like the way that the rental assistance programs were ever put in place. I don't like the fact that the landlords weren't paid directly. I don't like the fact that the tenant had to be actively involved for the landlord to receive anything. I don't like the fact that if a tenant skips out, the landlord can't apply for rent relief for however long the tenant was there before they left. So yeah, it's a complete joke, and landlords are getting screwed over.